Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessa, and I'm so happy you're here for this episode of Better Sex. I've dedicated my professional life to helping couples enjoy a fulfilling, intimate life. I believe that sex is important. Our connections to other people matter, and we're not living our life to the fullest if we aren't connecting emotionally and sexually with our partner. That's why I'm here, bringing ideas and information to help you live and love better.
Today's episode focuses on men. And in this context, when I say men, I am talking about people that have been raised male in our culture and who have a penis, because that's not always the definition of men. But the guest I'm having on the show today is talking specifically about men's sexual health concerns and some of the pressures that men face about sex in our culture. So that's why I'm defining it that way today. But the whole episode is devoted to men and their sexual concerns, dysfunctions specifically, perhaps, and approaches that's going to make sex way easier and more stress-free. So I'm excited to do this today. I'm sure we'll have a similar episode for women in the near future, upcoming at some point. My guest today is Jennifer Valli, and she's a seasoned therapist. I mean, she's been working 25 years as a therapist, but has gone back and gotten the training to become ASECT certified as both a sex therapist and a sex educator. She does a lot of teaching in med school and postgraduate work in Tennessee, where she is, and she's got a lot of great information for men about their sexual concerns and more specifically what they can do about it. All kinds of really practical suggestions and tips and ideas and ways of thinking that can really help. So I'm delighted that she's here on Better Sex to share her information with us today.
So, Jennifer, thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much.
So just say a little word about who you are and your background, just as introduce yourself to the audience real quick.
I guess I would say I'm a long-term, just kind of general therapist. I got my master's in 93, and I've been in inpatient and outpatient psychiatry since then. And then went back into sexual health, went back to school to get the certification at Michigan in sexual health, to get that training, and then went on to get the ASECT certification. So I'm in private practice in my office 4 days, and then I also teach at the University of Tennessee. The University of Tennessee split. It's one of the schools that are split, where they have the flagship school in Knoxville and the medical school is here. So I'm in the medical school and also in occupational therapy with the College of Health Professions. So I teach in those two, graduate students and medical students.
Okay. When you say here, where is that? Where are you?
Oh, that would help, huh? Yes. Yeah. Here would be in Memphis.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So our topic today is about men's sexual health and men's sexual concerns. From your perspective, what are the top reasons that men come in to sex therapy?
Yeah, this is, I would say, not based on science, what I'm about to say, these reasons. This would be based on more just who I end up seeing, who comes into therapy. They come in for erectile dysfunction, low desire, premature ejaculation, trouble with orgasming, which, we call delayed orgasm.
Right.
A desire discrepancy, where we've got one partner with a higher drive than another. And maybe somebody that has a different erotic interest, like a fetish, or somebody that has out of control sexual behaviors.
Okay.
Not in any particular order, but.
Yeah, and I'm racking my brain as you say that. Gosh, can I think of any others? But I think you just covered at least, 99% of the caseload that I also see out here in Seattle. So, okay. So let's dig in a little bit. I think it's your perspective that men face some different challenges with this maybe than women or
yes.
Other people. So what do you think is what are the biggest challenges that men face when they're dealing with dysfunction?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges for men when they experience a sexual dysfunction is this comes from society pressuring men, and it impacts how they approach sex. So like many men pressure themselves to be competent and skilled at everything, and then this ends up including sex.
Yeah.
Think about how men even just introduce themselves to one another. A lot of times it sounds like, nice to meet you. What do you do for a living? Kind of like, who are you? You know, this competency is being assessed even in those first few minutes of a conversation.
Mm.
And the problem that happens is if a man doesn't feel sexually competent, then he can feel anger, shame and failure, inadequate, worthless, powerless. And then it all makes him not want to engage, at least a batch of men. And I think they end up a lot of times in a double bind where they are thinking, okay, I could engage, but this is going to be humiliating because it may not go well. And we end up in a fight. I'm going to hurt the other person's feelings, or I'm not going to engage because we might end up in a fight. I'm going to hurt the other person's feelings. So you may end up with this guy who really hates conflict, and he's in this like nightmare, no-win situation.
Yeah. And probably can't, or most of the time is not talking about how incompetent he may feel or inadequate or afraid, where's the room to even admit those things?
Right. These are not words that men, we think about men, usually it's, they're able to identify, studies show they're able to kind of identify anger, irritability, and then we kind of go, what's behind that? We end up with the shame and, worthless, all these other kind of words that men are not usually socialized. And not, of course, we're speaking in generalizations here.
Right.
Not typically socialized to feel like they can go ahead and say, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I should point out we're even speaking in a generalized way about what's male or men, right?
That's right.
So I don't even know that we need to identify that for the audience, except for how they relate to that term and if it applies to themselves or these issues apply to them. So
right.
Yeah.
I think that what happens, and again, I am generalizing. You are not. I am generalizing. But I think it's tough because physical intimacy can be pretty particularly important for men. And this kind of relates to how they're socialized to communicate with one another. Like if we look at studies for communication between men, there's a lot of emphasis on exchanging fact-based information. So if you picture like two guys having a phone call with each other, tell me what you need me to do, tell me what you want me to know, did you see the game? There's this exchange of facts, right?
Yeah.
And regardless of gender, let's just say that, regardless of gender, physical intimacy offers this powerful nonverbal way to connect that's pretty powerful, and especially for people that don't open up in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's for either gender, but definitely for men who haven't all been socialized to be so open. I mean, the cool thing about that is it can leave an opportunity for some unique connections. Like say my husband, for example, works with men and women, and he's going to end up with friendships with women. But physical intimacy with me as partner offers me really a unique kind of opportunity to connect with him in a way that's different than all of his other relationships.
Yeah, and I guess what I take from what you're saying is that men in general socialize not to identify or speak about emotion or from that emotional place, right? But they can feel that emotion, and one of the ways you're going to experience that and express it to somebody is going to be through sexual intimacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, not all men fit in this box.
Right.
Men fit in this box. Lots of women fit in this box. But I think we just look at how we're socialized. It's definitely more, I would say, more acceptable. We're raised with it's okay to cry. You see two women on a dance floor dancing. Nobody thinks anything about it. Two men on a dance floor. What's going on here?
Yeah.
A lot of pressure on men to kind of fit in a certain box.
Right.
And actually, there were, I don't know how much I can go into here, but there were studies on penis size that gave us a window into how much pressure there is on men in terms of that piece of body image. A lot of times people think there's no body image for men, problems, but I think there are. Can I share?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so nobody tells the truth about sex, not even on anonymous surveys.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
So one group looked at Google searches on this topic, and you don't know which group, which gender is Googling, but
Right.
basically somebody says, my penis is blank, then they kind of assumed that was a guy.
Okay.
And what it showed was that the degree of worry for men about penis size is profound. There are more men Googling questions about the penis compared to Googling the brain and all body parts combined. They took all of those searches on brain and body parts combined. There's more on the penis than that. And then, they're worried about what women are going to think. But interestingly, we've got men making 170 searches on that one body part, and the woman makes one.
Wow.
170 to 1. And actually, if the one little woman there Googles something about size, she's more than 50% of the time likely to Google, what do I do with a penis that's too big? Or what do I do about pain from a bigger penis?
Yeah.
It's just 80% they think that they are smaller than average, which statistically...
Which, of course, can't make sense mathematically, right? Oh, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because I think this is a kind of worry that people have that they're not sharing. And just to lay this on the table for the listeners and realize, first of all, it's not uncommon to worry about it, but it's also mostly unjustified, right? Like this isn't, it doesn't need to consume you or make you feel bad.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So what else complicates this for men? Because it seems to me there's a lot of cultural assumptions, there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of expectations that I don't know that we even challenge in ourselves. I certainly know my clients don't. Really, it adds to the pressure.
Right. Okay. So I think what happens is that a couple of things. One is that we assume that men in society, we assume that men should be the initiator, right? Men should be the assertive one. And for men that aren't totally sexually confident, initiating can produce a ton of anxiety.
Yeah.
It becomes a problem for men if they have a lower drive, or if they maybe have a history of sexual trauma. I know you know this, but for listeners, 1 out of 7 men has been a victim of sexual abuse. So that's a big chunk of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think many men think that if the partner initiates, then they don't have to worry about initiating the wrong way. If the partner initiates, they don't have to second guess that their partner's into them or not. And so many times I think men just would prefer the other person to initiate because they just want to feel desired and valued. And I don't think that piece is totally unlike what it is for women,
Right. Yeah, it's sort of each waiting for the other, right, to demonstrate desire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the other part, I think that we end up assuming about men has to do with their sexual response. And that's not just men thinking this. I think men and women, everybody kind of thinks pretty black and white when it comes to what we think a men's sexual response should play out. So in other words, we think that arousal translates into being 95% at least rigid, and anything less wouldn't be good enough. We think erections are required for orgasm. And we think when we think about orgasming, we think of ejaculating out of the penis. We think about intercourse being the go-to plan. Anything else, is seen as a precursor to intercourse or as second-class sex if it's not intercourse. And that men should get an erection and they should orgasm immediately. There should not be any waxing and waning erections. And we think all of this because of our past sexual learning. Like, this is what sex looked like before when we were young. This is what worked before.
Well, it's also the only thing we see in TVs and movies, or don't even talk about porn, right? Like this is reinforced all over the place.
Exactly. Right. You see it and then you know it from your own reality. But the thing is that if men are going to stay sexual through a lifetime, they need to be kind of more flexible in their thinking. And we're going to kind of talk about that later when we talk about what to do about all this. But
well, men and whoever the partner is, male or female,
yes.
Like everybody needs to be more flexible about how they're thinking about this.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Certainly I get people that talk about what becomes clear is that they expect that anybody with a penis should be good to go at a moment's notice, right? All they have to do is think about sex and they've got a heart on.
Right.
What limiting beliefs, right? It's just devastating when that's not how it works.
I think you're exactly right. And I think it's like all just doubles or whatever for men that get a little bit older. Like it's all just magnified.
Yeah.
Because it's like the added predicament is that they think it should look exactly like it did a million years ago. But at the same time, we've got testosterone declining, we've got decreased blood flow, so it may be a little bit more difficult to get an erection or keep an erection. Ejaculation may be less forceful. Refractory times, that's the downtime. And again, I know you know all this.
Right, yeah.
But the refractory time is the downtime that we need to recover after orgasm. So this means that as we get older, it takes longer to orgasm a second time.
Yeah.
And so that shifts. Detumescence becomes quicker. So this means as a man gets older, the penis gets flaccid faster after orgasm compared to a younger man who's going to stay erect longer.
Right.
So we're seeing that sexual response doesn't look exactly the same, which to a man can look not good enough. Because of
like somehow now they're failing, right? They're going in the wrong direction somehow, and can look like that to their partner too, right? Everybody needs to understand these are natural changes. It's not something going wrong.
Right. That's right. You know, Barry McCarthy, who I think I just have a crush on. He's a sex therapist. I don't know how old he is, but he's wonderful. And he had, in one of his workshops that I went to, asked this question. I thought it was fabulous. He says, when a couple over 50 makes a decision to not be sexual, is it the woman's decision? Is it the man's decision? Or is it a decision that the couple makes together? Now, of course, this is a podcast on men, so you may be able to guess that it's the man. Overwhelmingly, it's the man that makes a unilateral decision to not be sexual because of everything we've just talked about. Kind of, they don't fit into this perfect box, and they don't want to be humiliated.
Yeah. Another thing I think goes into the age question is, the stimulation we need as people to get aroused is physical and it's mental.
Right.
And they have to add up to enough to get aroused or to have an orgasm, you know?
Yes.
And I think when we're young, the mental components are there for us more easily. You know, it's new, it's exciting, it's, all this stuff. And then as we get older, the mental components can be negative, right? These expectations, there's like a depressing effect of all these worries and everything else, right? So of course we need more physical stimulation to make up for that, or we have to deal with that negative part.
I think you're right. Couldn't agree with you more. And I think this is why, we always come back to grief and loss, in sex therapy. We certainly want to give practical tips and we want to be able to help them process where they are. But also sometimes because of the change in whether we look at women like post breast cancer treatment or men post prostate cancer treatment, there's sometimes it's the new normal and grief and loss that we come to.
Right. All right. So you just said what the tips that we want to give them, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this. So about some specifics, right? So what can men do in the moment if they're experiencing some sort of sexual dysfunction? And I think you have some ideas for specific problems they might be having.
Yeah. So I was thinking premature ejaculation is one thing that people come in over. And the best plan is really, I think, combining two things. One is a behavioral plan and the other is a medical intervention. And so the behavioral plan, and I'm going to send you the information on this book so you can post this, but the book is called Coping with Premature Ejaculation by Michael Metz and Barry McCarthy. And they've got just a fabulous plan. Really, anybody that's having difficulty with that, they need to get that book. It's all kind of outlined in chapter 8, but the whole book is good.
And I want to point out his books are meant for partnerships, right? This is not the guy with the issue is solving this by himself, right? This is a relationship issue, and it takes teamwork to address it.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is why I always want to see couples in my practice, even when one person thinks they're the one with the problem.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. So the book is a great, that'll summarize that. You don't have to go through the whole thing, right? They can.
Yeah, that chapter 8 gives a wonderful plan. And then what they can do if they're open to medicine. And then some people are not open to medicine, but if they are, they would combine that plan in that book with an SSRI. So something like a Zoloft or Lexapro. These are SSRIs that are used to treat depression and anxiety. But what we know from people that go on those medicines is that a common side effect is having a delayed orgasm.
Right.
And so we capitalize on that. For the guys with the premature ejaculation, it helps delay their orgasm, and it helps the anxiety that these guys often have.
Right. So obviously in consultation with your doctor, make sure it's a good idea, but that is an option because of those sexual side effects.
Right.
Yeah.
And then erectile dysfunction. And I'm just going to list some of these because I think you guys are going to do another podcast on kind of details about the medical interventions available to men, because there's actually a lot of interventions that are available, but the PD5 inhibitors are the medicines like Viagra, Cialis, and then the Muse is a small suppository that goes up the urethra. There's a vacuum pump, intracavernous injection. Surgery would be the most invasive.
Yeah.
But the thing I guess I think about those treatments, there's lots of them, so that's nice. But there's really not just one, I would say one silver bullet, wonderful plan for all guys. Each one has its strengths and its drawbacks. But the best plan is going to be combining one of those biomedical ways to help get the penis erect, and then combining that with a little bit of out of the box thinking. And that's what I'm hoping to talk to you about.
Okay. Yeah, please.
Okay. So now there was a movie, this will sound like we're getting off track, but there was a movie called Fight Club. Okay.
Oh yeah. I love that movie.
Yeah. Okay. So I modified that to Sex Club.
Oh, okay. Well, those exist too, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So I tried to take the most manly movie I could think of and try to address it with like a harder topic for men. So intercourse can still be the guy's good gold standard, even though you and I have talked about that, and that's a whole talk in itself. But if intercourse is not an option because of not maybe being able to get erect enough or for whatever the reason, then the guy needs to kind of shift his perfectionistic thinking and follow what I'm calling Sex Club rules. And so, basically, number one, the first rule is not to panic. Number two is not to panic because the movie duplicated the rule for the second rule.
Right.
Okay. 3, they may need fiction and friction to get erect. So touch,
right.
Kind of what you were saying.
Exactly. It's mental and it's physical. Yeah.
Yes. And years ago, maybe they only need one or the other, but now they probably need both if they're having a little bit of a difficulty.
Yeah.
And then 4, engage with the semi-rigid or moderately rigid penis. Do not wait for 100%. And then 5, and this is one I don't know that everybody knows. Men don't need an erection to have orgasm.
Yeah, this is something I talk to people about. Yeah. And they don't know generally. Yeah.
Yeah. Men can have an orgasm without a rigid erection. And some men know it. They just haven't put themselves in that situation with a partner, but they know it themselves. And other men have to kind of be told that this is a possibility so that they will engage in the first place, or they will actually engage long enough.
Yeah.
So that can happen. They want rule number 6 is to expect waxing and waning erections because it's going to be common. And then 7, that men can still experience orgasm if they don't ejaculate out of the penis. Now, this is not going to be for everybody, but I'm thinking about those listeners that you have that have had prostate surgery, or population. Their ejaculate goes back up into the bladder. It's called retrograde ejaculation, but the man still feels the orgasm. And rule number 8, I think, is probably the most important one and maybe the hardest, is don't apologize and turn it into a humiliating catastrophe. I think good men have been taught to apologize, but instead we're saying don't apologize, kind of transition to rule 9, which is make eye contact with your partner and be sexual a different way. And so when I say that, what I mean is providing manual or oral stimulation for the man. The man can rub his penis himself. He can take his penis and rub it against his partner's body, like the partner's thigh or breast, to produce his orgasm. The man can stimulate himself with the partner actively engaging, okay, not just
not just lying in bed with a book, which is what I say to people. Yeah.
Right. It should be an interaction. And some couples, the deal is that, and I know you know this, but I think some couples, and you may be curious if you find the same thing. Some couples will be fine with masturbating in front of the other. But then other couples, this is not going to be an option because it's not going to be something they're comfortable with, which is fine.
Right.
Or they make it about pleasuring the partner, and maybe the guy receives a back rub that night and they try something different another night.
Yeah. I am going to ask you, if you don't mind, at some point to write up your sex club rules so we can make that an attachment in the show notes. Because I'm imagining people scribbling this all down and trying to capture it. So.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Hi, it's Jessa. We're just going to take a quick pause here, or a little breather in the middle of the show. Thanks for listening so far. I'm wondering if you have a question that you want me to answer on a future episode. You can actually record a question for me at our website, bettersexpodcast.com. You're going to find the recorder on the footer of every page and on the side of the episode posts. And if I choose your question, I'll play it on the air and answer it as part of the show. I'd love to hear from you.
One of the things I'm asked about a lot is performance anxiety. So we're hoping to spend a minute talking about, so David Barlow is this research psychologist who studied this, and he wondered if you put people in stressful situations, will they suffer in terms of performance? Because we know some things that don't totally match with that. Like people report having sex in public is like the best thing ever. It doesn't quite mesh with if they have this much anxiety, should they be having any trouble? Where does that fit? So we had psychology students watch an erotic movie with a mercury string gauge on their penis. And that's a band placed on the penis. It gave Barlow this graph of any increase in size or volume of the penis. So as they watch this erotic video, we expect to see the blood flow changes because of an erection.
Right.
And so he divides the guys into two groups. And one group watches, they just get to watch the erotic video. Okay, that was the group you wanted to be in. Okay. The second group, I'm giving you a hint.
Yeah.
The second group watches the video, but they have these two huge electrodes on their chest. And he tells them, if you don't get a 45 to 50% erection in 5 minutes, you're going to get a shock on your chest.
Oh my gosh.
Basically, he's trying to produce performance anxiety with the idea that the guys with the huge electrodes are going to do worse with their erection.
Yeah.
Okay. So we end up with guys with the electrodes, they actually did better and produced stronger erection. So what is going on? We're trying to understand because there was a difference with the erections. So they do a follow-up experiment and they have everybody watching porn. The guys have headphones on, and in one ear, they're listening to the dialogue to the porn so they can hear the soundtrack to the movie.
Yeah.
Now, if you haven't ever watched porn, it is not the greatest dialogue. Okay. But nonetheless, it's the soundtrack to the movie. And then in the other ear, they're listening to the yellow pages being read. So they have the bagel store is on Hamilton Avenue.
Right.
It's not good. And then the men, they basically complete this post-test on the content to the yellow pages to see who paid attention to what. Did they pay attention to the dialogue or the yellow pages? The guys that ignored the yellow pages, that focused on the movie, got better erections.
Okay.
So what does this mean? What Barlow is saying is that assuming everything's physically fine, like blood vessels, everything's in good shape physically, if we focus on the eroticism of the moment, nature should take its course, men should get the erection. He's saying that it's less about what we think of as performance anxiety, beating yourself up, and it's more about missing out on what's going on in the moment. So it's lack of erotic focus that is causing some of this dysfunction. And so because of that, I think it's helpful for men to kind of know what happens in the brain leading up to orgasm, because there's some changes. We're not going to go through all the changes that happen in the brain, but
right.
That actually some things kind of decrease in activity. They need to decrease in activity. So you think about your prefrontal cortex. Most people know that that's involving in planning and thinking ahead, but you probably don't want to do a whole lot of that leading up to your orgasm. Okay.
Right.
Then your temporal lobe also decreases, and that controls hearing. So that lets you kind of tune out during orgasm. And then on the other hand, these other areas are activated, like the amygdala is one, and that makes sense because that's controlling intense emotions.
Yeah.
And the hypothalamus is activated, and that's involved in releasing hormones. So the point here is that there is both a tuning in and a letting go that's required leading up to orgasm, during orgasm. So I think, in terms of tips, what's this translate into? Men with any kind of difficulty really need to master that tuning in and being a good receiver of even non-genital touch. Because of that competency thing, men, I think, tend to be really good providers, right? They a lot of times, they're great providers, making sure that their partner is satisfied.
Right. They tend to be the giver in the encounter if they've got at least if they've got a female partner, right? And maybe don't receive so well.
Yeah, I think the trick is getting them to help them to learn how to receive. So one of the things I suggest is that men get an eye mask. This is I'm talking about the kind that people sleep with to kind of walk.
Right.
Yeah, so with a partner, if somebody's partnered, the guy can put the eye mask on. Maybe he still has boxers on, and have the partner kind of run items, fabrics, different things up and down the guy's arms and legs so that he can learn to tune in and receive. It's not about guessing what the item is, right? It's
not a mental exercise, right? It's a physical experience.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's kind of about tuning in and really, if there's no pressure during that space to get the erection. He's learning to tune in, mentally, basically learning to tune in the moment with a partner present, right? We want the guys to use all their senses, smell the partner's hair, make eye contact, kiss, not necessarily during the eye mask thing.
Right, exactly.
It's a different thing, okay? But, taste your partner's salty shoulder. The man, a lot of times, is going to piggyback his arousal off the partner's. So another thing I ask sometimes patients is if they would consider modifying how they self-stimulate or masturbate, which a lot of times helps them they have a little bit of control over the erections. So what men can do is that when they're totally by themselves and have no pressure, they can start to self-stimulate, and then they can stop in the middle of masturbating and intentionally get, let's say, mostly flaccid or flaccid, either one, by tuning into something totally not sexual. And then start to masturbate again, thinking about something erotic, and allow that erection to come back, and then go ahead and orgasm if you want. So they start to masturbate, purposely lose the erection, which is sort of what they want to stay away from in general, but we're getting them to kind of make friends with that and
do it on purpose, right?
Yes, do it on purpose, and then start to engage again, and the erection comes back. Don't wait for the erection to come back. You're working
you
on
have to create
kind of that, mind-body connection, developing a little more control over the erection. And if they want to take it to the next step, and if they have a supportive partner, they can do that with a partner. And so what that would look like would be, let's say you've got the man, he provides pleasure to his partner, and then they've talked about this ahead of time. He can put his hand on the partner's hand as a signal that they're going to take a break. And then the partner stops. Maybe the partner even goes to the bathroom for a few minutes to kind of make it a little bit easier for the guy to tune into something non-sexual. And then partner joins him again. And then together they can tune in and engage again, and the erection comes back. So what happens is this helps the couple. It helps them as a couple handle losing an erection in the moment. Like if the guy learns he can do that with the partner present, but he also learns that his partner can handle that too.
Yeah, it's not, if somebody loses an erection, it's not the end. Like it doesn't have to be over, it's not like they failed and now we all stopped. It's like, oh, this is a natural ebb and flow. We can move on from here.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you just described is what we a lot of times hear, that they lose the erection, they get frustrated, maybe the partner gets hurt. Is this because I'm fat? Is this because I've gained weight? Is this because you're not attracted to me?
Yeah.
It's not just the man himself having difficulty. It could be the partner too.
Yes.
Female, doesn't matter. Everybody the game is over. And what we're saying is the game's not over.
It's not over, right? It's only like halftime or whatever. Yeah. It also strikes me as such a, what you're asking them to do is like change channels. When it's like tune into the erotic focus.
Yes.
Now we're switching channels to the stock reports, and then we can switch back. And as they do that and have that practice, they are reinforcing the idea that being on the right channel, they really can, contribute to an erection. Like, they have that kind of control. This is not something that just happens to them randomly. It's something that they can control.
That's like a perfect analogy. Yeah, I love it. Love
cool.
It.
So I understand you. That's good.
Totally. I love what you just said. Yes, that's perfect. So if men, see if this still fits with what we're talking about. I was going to talk about if men say they haven't been, like maybe they've been doing what we just, like the bad scenario of what we've been talking about, like they haven't been sexual in a while. I was going to talk about kind of how to add that in.
Oh, I think that would be great. Yeah, okay. Because a lot of people, at least the people I see in my practice, right, they've been avoiding sex because of concerns like this, right? They feel inadequate. So,
right.
Yeah. So how do they make that, bridge that gap?
Yeah. So I think in general, we're going to say that they want to scaffold in physical intimacy one step at a time, and they want to change the goal from orgasm to pleasure. So taking away all that achievement stuff we talked about at the beginning. In sexual health, we say pleasure is the measure. That's not my statement. That's a sexual health thing that we say. Pleasure is the measure. And couples maybe might commit to like 2 or 3 times a week, maybe at least 15 minutes, say each time, and both are practicing being more comfortable in the roles of giver and receiver. So let's just say, I'm going to say we have, just for our sake tonight, that we have, this will work for gay couples, but so we don't get lost in pronouns, we're going to make this a heterosexual couple example. And it'll be, let's say, a guy that has had erectile dysfunction. And so it's not going to warn the listeners that it's equality. It's not going to sound totally equal, but I think equality is measured over time with sex, not just in one night. So it may not sound completely equal, but let's say that in the first week or two, the couple starts with this kissing, non-genital touch. They shouldn't skip that because they're working on this tuning in, and also who initiates and what does ideal initiation look like for everybody. And then say they get to week 3 and 4. And so we expand on that. The man maybe could provide pleasure to his partner with oral manual stimulation, whichever is least anxiety producing. We always start with what's least anxiety producing for both of them. And then this helps the man feel a little more sexually competent because he's helped the woman or his male partner have orgasm or pleasure. And then in the same night, well, actually, we're staying heterosexual here for a second. So in the same night, the woman would provide non-genital touch for the man. So maybe they do that eye mask thing, maybe it's a back rub, but no orgasm or erection pressure for the guy that night.
Yeah.
We're trying to get both of them to feel really more comfortable in that space and to get him to feel more competent and good about what they're doing. And then the next, say week 5, say he pleasures the woman one way or the other. And then the man would maybe self-stimulate or masturbate with the partner present, right? So if couples, again, are going to be freaked out, then this is not the next step.
Right.
Not the next step. But if they can do that, it's kind of a nice next step because a lot of times the man may be able to do this on his own, getting semi-rigid, and then just adding in the presence of another person. That's a step on its own,
Right.
And then we get to week 6 or 7. The man could provide stimulation for the female, but maybe this week now the lady provides some genital stimulation for the man. So with this week, this would be when they would want to add in maybe the PD5 inhibitor, the Viagra, the Cialis, or any other biomedical way that they've worked out with their urologist that will help them. And then they combine that with the sex club rules where they engage with the semi-rigid penis, expect the waxing and waning erections, don't apologize, all that stuff. And then they can move towards intercourse being included in this menu of options. So if the guy can get erect enough, it's an option. But he needs to keep in mind those sex club rules because he needs to know that he can transition to another way of being sexual if that's like intercourse is kind of could be a no-go for that night.
Right. And at that point, they've had an awful lot of practice with other things to be doing. So, yeah.
Exactly. And so maybe a week or two before intercourse, if they're going to try that, then I ask couples to pick maybe 2 potential positions and get in those positions. They're not, before they're ready to have intercourse, right? They might just get in those positions simulating intercourse so that they're not so nervous for later on. But just pick 2 positions that you think at 2. It's always nice to have a backup and then know which way to go. In general, if a man's having difficulty with ED, erectile dysfunction, man being upright or man on top is better for him.
Just for gravity's sake, right?
Exactly. It's because of gravity with blood flow. We need that blood flow compared to woman on top.
Yeah.
And really, I think if anybody takes anything away from this, frequency is your best friend. Frequency, right? If not, there's going to be so much pressure for those times that they do try to connect. And I think people hate the idea of, scheduling, and people just really hate that idea because they want it to be passionate. But remember that what you do during that time does not have to be necessarily all defined. It's you want it to be passionate. You can look at initiation. What's ideal initiation for everybody? Maybe it needs to be a little more assertive initiation. Even an 80-20 split with whoever initiates is going to be a lot better than if one person is the initiator all the time. That is every couple's different, right? But and even lubricant application. If we stay with the heterosexual example here, if the woman puts the lubricant on the man, this is more like saying, I want to be a part of this, rather than the guy putting lubricant on himself. Okay, this is your deal. You take it. Right. You're just lucky I'm here.
Yeah.
Right? So let me just speak 1 second on delayed ejaculation. We don't forget about these guys. Really, a lot of delayed ejaculation is psychological. So the sex club rules and everything we kind of just talked about should apply and be helpful. But alcohol definitely delays orgasm. 2 to 3 drinks in that night can delay orgasm. 7 to 10 drinks in a week can lower overall testosterone. And I would probably ask them, not if they're partnered, to not have intercourse more than about 8 or 9 minutes. And basically that's because I know you know this, Jessa, but if we take away foreplay, which we shouldn't do, but if we do, average intercourse is about 4 to 7 minutes. So, basically stopping at about 8 to 9 minutes or so many songs worth, however you count, is going to be better than going on, because it can set up a miserable situation.
Yeah, it starts to be they're chasing something, right? And just feeling worse and worse and worse about it, instead of like, let's not have orgasm even be the goal.
Right
Now,
right.
Like in the long term, sure, we want to be able to have that as an option, but
exactly. And remember that really 30% of women, and I know you've covered this before, but only 30% of women, intercourse gets them to orgasm.
Right.
So clitoral stimulation, that just knowing that piece, I think, can take some pressure away from the guys.
Yes, absolutely. Well, that's a lot of information that I know we have wedged into this podcast, but I do have one more I just sort of want you to address quickly, which is, so if a man is having erectile dysfunction, how does he know if it's psychological or physical?
Yes, that's
or what proportion of both? It's not like it's one or the other.
I think sometimes you're right. It's not one. A lot of times it's not. And I think a lot of our providers, they will tell you they're more sophisticated than to think about things so black and white. But in reality, they a lot of times will say, okay, they ask 2 questions and I'm going to tell you. And they're like, okay, it must be psychological or it must be physical, which is not the case, because really these 2 things, psychological and physical components, interact with each other and they impact each other. But 2 questions that we tend to ask. One is if a guy can wake up with erections at least some of the time. And this is because guys, every 90 minutes during REM sleep, have erections about that last maybe 5 minutes all night long during REM sleep. And so if you assume the guy's healthy with good blood flow, if he can wake up in the morning at least some of the time, then like you'll hear that guys wake up and they say, okay, I had a piss hard on, right? But that erection is really nothing to do with them having to go to the bathroom. It's a coincidence.
Right.
And what we used to do is we used a nocturnal tumescence penile test. We put the guy to bed with a string gauge on the penis. We keep track of the erections all night. But now we just ask, can you wake up with the erections some of the time? If he's physically okay, if he can wake up with an erection at least some of the time, and he's physically okay, so the ED is going to look more psychologically based.
Yeah.
And then we ask if the guy can be by himself without a problem. And the assumption here is that if the guy only has problems with his partner, then it's going to look more psychological. If he has trouble with ED across the board in all situations, it's going to be more likely to be physical. But what we're saying, you and I, is that we want to try to resist the urge of saying it's one or the other, because they impact one another.
Absolutely.
If you think of a guy that has prostate surgery, 1 week after prostate surgery, cancer, and he has erection difficulties, it's really this. The thing is that the greater the physical compromise, the less psychological distraction is needed to put the person in the dysfunctional range.
Right.
So a guy after prostate cancer doesn't necessarily need a lot of psychological stress to cause the erectile dysfunction right after in the first week. But if you get a man that's diabetic, borderline diabetic, we've got histological changes to the nerve fibers in the penis, the diabetes isn't too severe, he could masturbate and not have a problem because he can just focus on himself. But if we add a partner into that, he may have trouble because we've added just enough psychological stress to cause a problem that tips the scale.
Yeah, which is a nice way to make sure we're not dismissing the physical part. Just because somebody can masturbate successfully or have an erection doesn't mean there are not physical things going on. But when you just add a little bit of psychological stress, it shows up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been a great and really useful conversation for listeners. I mean, at least I hope it has. Hopefully, maybe they'll comment and let us know. But you've just been a wealth of information. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jessa.
Yeah. Well, wait, before we go, I do want to give you the chance to, share your website or, talk a little bit about how people can learn more about you.
Yeah. People can find me. They'll find me either on Facebook or Twitter or my website's jennifervalli.com. I think the main site I want to make sure people are getting is the ASECT website. That's the American Association of Sexual Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. Really, this is way too important of an issue to get somebody that hasn't been trained and that has, they're not just maybe a regular marital therapist speaking from personal experience or just because the topic's interesting. We want somebody that's using, that's had a lot of training. And I can assure you the ASECT training is rigorous.
It's extensive. Yes, it's quite a commitment to be certified. Yes, so that is important. So thank you for reinforcing that.
Thank you so much, Jessa.
Yeah, I'm so glad you were on the show and made the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.